Starting off in the AL West, let's first talk about the Angels. Now, this is going to be one of the more interesting teams to watch because it seems like they are already looking to make moves. They traded Taylor Ward, longtime left fielder, to Baltimore in exchange for Grayson Rodriguez to help out that rotation, which is a big hole they needed to fill. You probably are still looking to get an arm or two at the back end of that rotation, but I think you do feel much better about your front end using Kikuchi, Grayson Rodriguez, and Jose Soriano as your one, two, three. I think you can feel pretty all right about that. Now you're looking at this lineup, and you've kind of got a hole in the outfield to fill now. I think Joe Adell's gonna still play center field for them. I would have liked to see them potentially hold on to Taylor Ward, and that way you could do something like moving Mike Trout to DH, get rid of that injury possibility of him playing in the outfield every day because I do think the Angels should and more than likely will trade Jorge Soler at some point this offseason. They got him from Atlanta last offseason, and he just kind of was not the power bat that they wanted. So I think the Angels need to go and get an outfielder. And a name that I really liked for the Angels was Trent Grisham to go play center field for them. Maybe move Joe Adell over to right, and then you can DH Mike Trout. But Trent Grisham accepted the qualifying offer with the Yankees. So I think another name that you could be looking for outfielders that have some flexibility to play left, center, right, whatever they may need. I think a guy like Harrison Bader is really interesting. A guy that spent time with Minnesota and Philly this last season was very good for Philly down the stretch after they got him at the trade deadline. I think he'd be a nice fit in this Angels outfield. You can play him in center, use Bryce Teodosio as more of the fourth outfielder, Kyron Paris. Those can be your depth guys because I don't think the Angels are going to be wanting to play those guys every day. So I think the Angels' biggest need right now is to go fill that outfield spot that they just dropped. All right, moving over, let's talk about the A's. And the A's, they have a lineup that you could look at, and they might be ready to go out and play opening day right now. You look at this lineup, they've got some of the best young potential in all of Major League Baseball. You've got Kurtz, Muncy, Wilson, Soderstrom all coming back for sophomore seasons. Shaylen Lear's one of the best young catchers in baseball. Then you've still got Lawrence Butler, Brent Rooker out there in that right field DH platoon. I think you've got a lot of talent in this lineup. I think where they need to look is pitching. The A's were one of the worst in baseball when it came to giving up home runs, and that ballpark obviously is no help. So what they need to look at is going and getting pitching that's not going to give up home runs. And I think a good guy that they can go after here to who has shown that he's not going to give up a lot of home runs, I think they can go get Ranger Suarez. They did show last season that they went and spent money on an arm. They went and got Luis Severino. I think Ranger Suarez is the perfect add to the Athletics rotation. You can look through these home run per nine numbers, and since 2021, 0.3, 0.9, 0.9, 0.8, 0.8. This is not a guy that gives up home runs. I think that's just the addition that the Athletics need to that rotation if they want to push forward to contend for a wild card spot or even for that division. Next up, let's talk about the Astros. Now, the Astros fell just short of a playoff berth. I can't imagine that they will go into this offseason content with what they have when what they had was not good enough to get into the postseason. So there's a couple moves I could see them making. I think they're going to look to add an arm. They're losing Framber Valdez, obviously, who's been their ace, the front of that rotation for several years now. I think they need to look at another front end starter. I think they would be content with running Hunter Brown as their ace going forward. But I think you're going to need a guy in this two spot in between Hunter Brown and Eric Eddy. Eric Eddy's a good arm, but he's more of a mid back end rotation guy in front of guys like Christian Javier and Jason Alexander. So I think a guy that the Astros can go get is Michael King. Michael King coming off of an up and down season with San Diego, dealt with injuries, and I think he's going to be the perfect fit for Houston. He's going to be a cheaper deal than a lot of the other top end free agents just because of dealing with the injuries he dealt with last year, the up and down season that he did kind of struggle with. You see the ERA at 3.44, but the FIP was higher at 4.42. He kind of did struggle when he was up this season with San Diego. But you look at this 2024 campaign where he was at his best, 2.95 ERA, 200 plus strikeouts in 173 innings. He was really good in that full season, got seventh place in the Cy Young voting, as you can see right here. So I think Michael King would be a really good veteran add to add here into this rotation in between guys like Hunter Brown and Spencer Arrighetti. Now, if they didn't want to go the free agent route and they wanted to maybe go and make a trade, I could see them going and giving Milwaukee a call for Freddie Peralta. Now, I don't think Milwaukee should give up Peralta. I think they need to hold on to him and look to add if they want to go farther than the NLCS, where they kind of just laid down and died in front of the Dodgers. But I think they're more than likely going to move on from Freddie Peralta, and I think the Astros would be a fantastic landing spot for him. I think the Astros do have guys in that farm system they'd be willing to give up to get him, and I think he would fit in fantastic here with Hunter Brown, Spencer Arrighetti, and Javier to establish a pretty good Astros rotation. All right, next up, we got the Texas Rangers. The Rangers had an underwhelming season, finished at about 500. They're a team that's was let down by their offense. Jake Berger was one of the names that they went and got last season. He was underwhelming at best, so I think looking for a first baseman is definitely something they can look for. I wonder if this is kind of the spot where we see a guy like Luis Arias go. Just kind of go hit leadoff for them, play first base. Maybe that's your on base guy in front of guys like Marcus Semien and Corey Seager. Another way I could see them going is getting more of a platoon guy if they want to keep Jake Berger's power right-handed bat in. I could also see them going for a left-handed power bat. And I think a good fit for the Rangers here at that first base spot would be Ryan O'Hearn. Now, if they wanted to keep Jake Berger's bat and utilize that power right hand, you're getting O'Hearn as a left-hander who has struggled against left-handed pitching. So I wonder how a platoon between those two guys at first, maybe you use one of them at DH. I wonder how that would play out for the Rangers. I think another spot that the Rangers need to add is at the closer position. Kind of Robert Garcia, the only really name coming back. They're losing Chris Martin, they're losing Sean Armstrong. I think they need to add to the back end of this bullpen. I think they need to look at a established closer. I think they could look at a guy like a Robert Suarez, like a Raisel Iglesias. I think they need to go get a closer and then kind of shift Robert Garcia back into that setup role where he was for the majority of his last season and his career thus far. And next, we'll talk about the Mariners. The Mariners were so close to getting to that World Series this past season. And honestly, I don't see them making a lot of changes to this lineup. Now, they did just go and re-sign Josh Naylor, so that is a big move for them that they did need to make. Josh Naylor was fantastic for them after the trade deadline, down the stretch, and through the postseason. I think they could look to add an infielder, but I also wonder if they're just going to be content with running out guys like Ben Williamson and Cole Young, maybe at second and third base, respectively. They're the young guys that got some playing time this past season. I wonder if with the full off season and another spring training that they like those guys going forward. And if they like those guys playing at second and third base, I wonder if they go for a more of a depth piece that's shown some versatility that can play those spots. If maybe a guy like Williamson or Cole Young shows some struggles early in the season, I think a guy like Jose Iglesias would be a really nice fit here. He played second base, third, and shortstop for San Diego this past season. He played all those positions for the Mets the year before. I think he's been a good utility spot for a lot of teams over his career. I think the Mariners would be a really nice fit here. He can be the depth behind Williamson and Cole Young. That would be a really nice fit. Another thing that the Mariners could look to do is go and make a trade for a guy. And if they aren't really content with what they have, I think they could look to add at the second base spot. I think Brendan Donovan would be a really nice fit for the Mariners. He's also been a guy that has played multiple positions. He could shift over, play third base if you need him to. I think he would be a really nice fit. He had a nice season with the Cardinals this past year, got his first career All-Star appearance, hit 287, got on base at 353. He was a all-star, former Gold Glove winner. He's a very good, just well-rounded overall player. Not a power bat, but I think this is a guy that you can put at the front of your lineup. Maybe he can hit in front of guys like Naylor or Rowley or Julio Rodriguez. I think you've already got plenty of guys in this lineup that have the pop. So I think you need a guy like Donovan that's an established good glove, a good veteran, and can get on base. Moving over to the AL Central now, let's talk about the Tigers. Now, the Tigers, I think their number one priority this offseason should be doing whatever they can to work out a contract extension with Tarek Skubal. Skubal, obviously one of the best pitchers in baseball, has 1 year left on his deal. And from the talks of it right now, they're not close to getting a deal done. There's been talks of them being up to $250 million off of what Skubal and Scott Boras want versus what the Tigers have been willing to offer. So I think that needs to be their first priority, just figuring something out there. And if they can't, it sounds crazy to say you got to trade Tarek Skubal away, but this isn't a guy that you can just let walk. I think you've got to learn from the Angels' mistake letting Otani walk this couple off seasons ago. You can't just let a guy like this just walk. You need to get any value out of him that you can, and you'll get a lot out of this guy. You can get an insane package for a guy like Skubal. Maybe a team like the Dodgers send over Jose De Paulo, or like a team like the Mets ship over, a couple of prospects with one of their young starters like a Nolan McLean. I think getting rid of Scooble would be a horrible mistake, but if they can't work out a contract with him, I think they have to. Now, if you want to look through the lineup and look for an ad, I think they could use another infielder. Colt Keith and Zach McKinstry don't strike too much confidence in me as far as the bats go in this infield. I think a guy like a Glaber Torres, who they went and got last offseason, he was all right on the 1 year deal, but I don't think they're going to bring him back. I think they're going to be aggressive as far as a bat goes. I think they're going to go look at a guy like a Bo Bichette and see what they can get there. I think he could play second base. He could play shortstop. He's kind of a little bit of a versatile athlete there. But I think they might also be looking at a guy like Alex Bregman, who they had talks with last offseason. Got the AJ Hinch connection, obviously, from his time in Houston. I think that would be a really nice fit. He can go play third base. He can play second base. He can kind of do whatever. All right, and up next we got the Minnesota Twins. Now the Twins, I think they just kind of need to pick a direction. If they're gonna get a push to this rebuild, I think they need to get to trade some guys away. Trade away a guy like a Joe Ryan. Trade away a Pablo Lopez. There's a lot of value in those guys. That's two top 30, top 25 pitchers in all of baseball that you're kind of just hanging on to, looking into a rebuild. And I think if the Twins are looking to be competitive, then they need to have a really big offseason here. So I think the Twins need to just pick a direction. Either sell off these contracts, sell off these big name pitchers that you do have, or look to add some veterans because there's a lot of holes in this lineup. I think you need to add a couple infielders. I think you need another outfielder. But there is still some talent on this roster. Ryan Jeffers, Royce Lewis, Byron Buxton, Matt Wallner, Trevor Larnach. There's some good bats in here still. So I think the Twins are kind of in this weird middle ground where I don't think they're going to be terrible next season, but I don't think they're going to be competing for that division or a wild card spot or anybody. They kind of, to me, seem like a team that's going to win anywhere between 70 to 75 games next season if they do nothing. So I think they need to either pick a direction, kind of sell, go for the full rebuild, or have a big offseason, which is not something that I think they should do, but I think is more likely than them selling off their top end pitching. Next up, we got the Chicago White Sox, and the White Sox are a weird one. They dealt with a lot of injuries to the starting rotation, got guys like Drew Thorpe, who were kind of just out for the whole season. They were dealing with all of their starters pretty much from their opening day rotation that were out by May. And then they had to call up guys like Davis Barton and Jonathan Cannon and Shane Smith just kind of earlier than they liked to. So I think this is a team that needs to look at getting their pitching healthy that they were going to run into the season last year, or they need to look to add an established couple of veterans, kind of like what they did last year, signing a guy like Martin Perez to a 1 year deal. So I think this could be a team that looks at a guy like a Cal Quantrill. He kind of bounces around some of the lower end teams. Last year he spent time with the Marlins before he went to the Braves for a little while. The year before he was on the Rockies. I think he's been a guy that's kind of just been willing to sign with teams that aren't exactly World Series contenders. I do think if you look at this lineup, it is much improved from the last couple of seasons. You had guys like Lennon Sosa, Colson Montgomery, who did kind of have breakout seasons. Sosa had 20 home runs, OPS right around 800. Colson Montgomery got Rookie of the Year votes after his call up in late July. He hit 21 home runs in only 70 games. He was outstanding. I think a big second season from Colson Montgomery, he can kind of lead your lineup to maybe being in the top half of baseball. I do think they could also look at still trading away Luis Robert. I think he has value. Stole 32 bags last year, plays great defense in center field. There's value there. I think you could get him to a team like the Mets or the Dodgers. I think getting him to a contender that has good hitting staff, they can kind of fix his bat. I think there's a lot of value in Luis Robert. So I think the White Sox, if they're going to make some moves, I think they need to sell Luis Robert, and then I think they need to look to add into the rotation or maybe add a reliever. Moving on, we got the Guardians. And the Guardians, a team, they've made that fantastic comeback to win the AL Central, got into that wild card series, and then lost to the Tigers in 3 games. I think this is a team that definitely needs to make some improvement so they're not falling 15 games behind the Tigers in that AL Central in the first place. Now, I think the biggest hole on this roster is obviously the loss of Emmanuel Clase. Had the gambling scandal where he was kind of proven with ties to the mafia or whatever was going on there. So he's not coming back. I think the Guardians could definitely look to add a closer. You did have guys like Cade Smith and Hunter Gaddis have good seasons at the back end of this Guardians bullpen, but I think they are going to need to look for another arm. And I think this would be a good fit for a guy like Robert Suarez, coming off back-to-back All-Star appearances. Led the MLB in saves this last season. I think he'd be a really nice arm back there. Think if they're going to look at this lineup, they need to add a middle infielder. Second base is a big hole. Brian Rocchio and Gabriel Arias are kind of just not very good bats. I know Rocchio is pretty solid on defense, but the stick just really doesn't establish a lot of confidence in me. I think this is a team that should look at Brendan Donovan from St. Louis. I think he'd be a fantastic fit at second base here. I think Jose Ramirez needs to see the Guardians go out and make some moves, as he said that he's not going to sign another contract if the Guardians don't look to build a contender around him. And last up in the AL Central, we've got the Kansas City Royals. The Royals coming off a disappointing season where they missed the postseason entirely. I think this is a team that's going to need to add a bat. I think specifically in the outfield, guys like Michael Massey, Kyle Isbell don't establish too much confidence in me. I do like Jack Caglione out there. I think he had a nice season after they called him up. But I do think that they need to add another bat. And I think a really great addition to this outfield would be Jarren Duran. Jarren Duran, a guy hit 50 doubles this last season. Jarren Duran could do absurd statistics in this yard. He could hit 2020. He could go 20 20 20 20. He could hit 20 homers, steal 20 bags, 20 doubles, and 20 triples. And he could do it season after season after season alongside with fantastic defense out in left or center, wherever they put him. I think Jarren Duran would be an awesome add to this Royals team. I look elsewhere on this team. I don't think they need to add into that rotation. I think you could look for an upgrade, but I think the five of Reagans, Waka, Lugo, Bubic, and Noah Cameron is one of the better 5-man rotations in baseball. And then I think you've still got a lot of good names in this bullpen: John Schreiber, Lucas Ursig, Angel Zerpa, and Carlos Estevez. So I think their pitching, I think it is set, maybe depending on what the Red Sox would ask in a potential Jarren Duran trade. Maybe you have to give up one of these arms. I think the Royals are just a couple of bats away from being serious contenders, not only AL Central, but in the American League entirely. Moving over to the AL East now, let's start with the Boston Red Sox. The Red Sox, just shy of 90 wins this past season. They were a playoff team before they lost to the Yankees in the wild card series. I think this is a team that definitely needs to look to do some shakeups in this lineup. They've got to trade one of these outfielders. They've got 5 guys out here competing for 3 spots and then the DH spot. You got Jarren Duran, Cedar Rafaela, one of the best, two of the best, really, defensive outfielders in baseball. You've got Wilyer Abreu, Roman Anthony, and then Matasaka Yoshida, who I think they're going to look to put at DH. So I think they need to sell on Jarren Duran, as we just talked about with the Royals. I think You get rid of Jarren Duran, you could put Roman Anthony in left field, and then you can put Yoshida at that DH spot. And then I think you're gonna get a good haul back for Duran. And then I think they need to look to add, and I think the guy that the Red Sox should go all in on is Pete Alonso, play first base for them. I think his bat would fit very nicely in the middle of this lineup. I think it would be the power hitter that the Red Sox definitely need. You definitely did kind of feel the loss of Devers after they got rid of him. They did lose some pop in the middle of that lineup, but I think getting a guy like Pete Alonso would be a necessary addition. Moving on, we've got the Yankees. The Yankees were a playoff team last year, got to the ALDS before getting taken out by the Blue Jays. I think the Yankees are going to be one of the more interesting teams to watch this offseason because they're losing a lot of guys. You look at their bullpen, they're losing Luke Weaver, they're losing Devin Williams, and I don't know if they're going to bring back either of those guys. So I think looking for another reliever is something they definitely need to do. And I wonder how a guy like Kirby Yates would do in this bullpen. Kirby Yates, a guy that has shown some versatility in the bullpen. He set up games with the Dodgers this year. He closed games with the Dodgers this year. He even kind of pitched as like a middle bullpen or a long reliever at times. So I think that would be a really nice addition to this bullpen that could use some flexibility. I think they will use a Bednar in the closer role this year. Then you still got guys like Doval, Fernando Cruz, Tim Hill, Mark Leiter. You've still got some names in this bullpen, but I think they could definitely use another established vet. And then you look at this lineup, and I think a lot of it is kind of stuck as it is. I think they're going to keep the infield mostly intact. They might look to move Volpe and get another shortstop. I don't think they will. I think they're going to run Volpe for another season. So I think they're going to be looking at the outfield. And I think the easy move that they will make is just to re-sign Cody Bellinger. I think he had an outstanding season with the Yankees this year. Just get him on like a 3, 4 year deal. Get him back in left field where he'll hit another 30 home runs. I think that would be the right move for the Yankees. Moving on, let's talk about the Rays. The Rays missed the postseason for the first time since before COVID, and I think this is a team that needs to look to add in this outfield. I think Jake Magnum is kind of a weak spot in left field here for this team. I think they could look at an outfield bat, and I think they would look at some of these cheaper options. I don't think they're going to go and throw money at a guy like Cody Bellinger or Kyle Tucker. I think I could see them going for a guy like a Miguel Andujar, maybe a Harrison Bader, a Mike Yastrzemski, kind of go for more of the veteran guy that's kind of shown they can do it and is not going to be nearly as expensive for this team because the Rays have kind of shown in past seasons that they're not going to spend a lot of money. I think they're also more than likely going to trade Yandy Diaz, kind of take the value that he has while they can. And then you look at this rotation, you still have some guys in here. Drew Rasmussen, Ryan Pepio, Shane Baz, Shane McClanahan should be ready by opening day. Hopefully, everything with that arm injury, the surgery, plays out through the offseason. He'll be ready to go. But I think the Rays are just going to kind of look to add a couple smaller bats and then just kind of roll out the same Rays team. Because you did have guys like Junior Caminero and Jonathan Aranda that were pleasant surprises from the minor leagues in these past couple seasons. So I think the Rays, they're just going to look to add in the outfield. Maybe they look to add a reliever or a back end starter, but I think just outfield is the priority for the Rays this season. Now let's move over and talk about the Orioles. The Orioles were a very disappointing team, definitely let down by their pitching. You did have a couple bright spots. Trevor Rogers came over, had himself a really nice season, sub 2 ERA, but they also just went and traded away Grayson Rodriguez, sent him to Anaheim, and they got Taylor Ward, which I don't really love the move for Baltimore. Taylor Ward is obviously an upgrade in left field over what they got. And maybe you are still looking at getting another outfielder, depending on how much you like a guy like Beavers or Tyler O'Neill playing it right. But the priority definitely has to be the rotation, which is something that I probably would have told you anyway. And then they went and traded away Grayson Rodriguez. A name that I did like going here was something like a Shota Imanaga, who wasn't going to be as expensive as those top tier guys like Cease and Framber. But since he accepted the qualifying offer with Chicago, I think Baltimore should look at a guy like Framber Valdez or Dylan Cease to go with this front end of the rotation and help lead them going forwards. And I think another spot they need to look at is the back end of this bullpen. You do have Andrew Kittredge coming back after his little stint with the Cubs, but I think that they're going to look at another guy. We are kind of always worried about Felix Bautista staying healthy. Did go down with a season-ending injury late last year. So I think getting a guy that can maybe have some flexibility. You'll go for a guy like a Luke Weaver who's closed games in the past, or he can set up games for Bautista if he's going to pitch. Moving on, we got the Blue Jays. And now the Blue Jays were oh so close to getting the World Series title. And I think the priority for the Blue Jays this offseason needs to be doing whatever they can do to get Bo Bichette back in Toronto. I think he will want to stay in Toronto, but I think they're going to need to show him they want him to stay. The Blue Jays have not been scared to open up the checkbook in recent years. They were all in on guys like Shohei Ohtani and Juan Soto the last couple off seasons. So I think they should be able to do whatever they can do to get Bo Bichette. And I wonder if the Blue Jays get in on the Kyle Tucker sweepstakes. Kyle Tucker is the big name free agent this offseason. They went in on Shohei. They went in on Juan Soto in the last couple of seasons. I wonder if they go in on a guy like Kyle Tucker. If not, I think they could also look to add to this rotation. You're losing Chris Bassett, but I think the late season surprise that was Trey Savage is going to be kind of a great add to this rotation going forward. But I do think they're going to look to add another front end guy. I think this would be a great fit for Framber Valdez coming over from Houston. I don't know if he needs to be the number one. I think you can still rely on a guy like Gossman to go out and start your opening day and then have, Shane Bieber, Savage, and Framber Valdez behind him in whatever order they decide. Maybe Framber is your number one. But I do wonder if that is kind of an approach a team will take after you had the cross up with his catcher last season with Houston. I wonder if any teams are going to look at him as a number one this offseason just due to the culture problems he could potentially bring with that. But that's kind of just a concern I have. Well, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know what you guys think I got right, what you think I got wrong. What should your favorite team do this offseason? Maybe there's a couple of names that I forgot about in free agency or in the trade block that you think your team needs to go for. So let me know down below. But for now, guys, that's going to be all. We'll see you guys in the next one.